This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon. This is a workshop in Vermont Public Utility Case number 25A-0998. This is a case regarding the Vermont Department of Public Services Heat Pump AMI Analysis Report. My name is Rowan Cornell Brown. I'm a utilities analyst at the Public Utility Commission at the Vermont Public Utility Commission. And also here with me from the PUC is Deirdre Morris, a policy analyst. So this workshop is being convened by the Commission at the request of the Department of Public Service to discuss the department's draft report, which was filed in this case on May 16th, 2025. This workshop is intended to be a technical discussion of the draft report. So this is not the venue for talking about policy implementations or programmatic things. At this point, we want to, as much as possible, focus on the technical aspects of the report. So I think what we have for the agenda is a presentation by the Department of Public Service and their partners who helped develop the report. And Efficiency Vermont also asked that some time be reserved for them to make a brief presentation. So we are going to accommodate that. So I will leave it up to the presenters how they want to handle questions and when they want to hear them. But I would ask that to the extent that we are having discussions during a report, we keep them brief and clarifying so that we can stay on schedule, and hopefully there will be plenty of time for questions and conversation at the end of each presentation. So with that said, oh, and I should say you probably heard the little voice, but this session is being recorded through GoToMeeting, and there will be a method by which we can make the recording available. So if you would like that, you can send a request to the commission clerk after this workshop. So with that said, I want to so who, Chris Simbelman, are you driving the ship?
I am sharing the slides, yes. I
Okay.
think Dave Korn's going to kick us off. Can everyone see the slides okay? I'm going to go into full or slideshow mode here. I just want to make sure. Does that work for everyone?
It does.
Perfect. All right. Dave, are you there? Do you want to get us going?
You're on mute, Dave.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Korn, and I'm from Ridgeline Energy Analytics. I'm representing the consulting team here for the beginning. The team is made up of Ridgeline, Demand-Side Analytics, and West Hill Energy and Computing. You probably run across us at various times, the three companies that is. So why don't we jump right into it? I'm going to give the beginning part, pass off the AMI analysis to Demand-Side Analytics, cover the metering piece, and then Catherine will take the slides home covering the survey piece. All right. Why don't we jump right into it? So the objectives are pretty straightforward and hopefully not unexpected. It's to assess heat pump usage across Vermont, and we mean across all of Vermont geographically, to estimate the electric use of those heat pumps and the heat provided, so that then gives you fuel displacement. And then look at, and this wasn't the original goal because we didn't start with a presumption things were low, but so strictly speaking, investigate how they're used and why. I don't think it's a secret now that some of the usage is lower than some might have suspected. So that's why the slide says investigate drivers of low heat pump utilization, where people aren't using them as much as maybe we would expect or like. Next. So this is just a quick snapshot of the study as envisioned. And today we're going to be talking about a portion of this. So this is showing that we're performed an AMI, or Advanced Metering Infrastructure Analysis of high frequency electric data. We surveyed homeowners. We metered heat pumps in homes, and we also then, and we won't talk about this today, but did some additional analysis on fuels, and TRM updates is for the future if needed, and then a low income study is not commented on today. So again, we're focusing on the left three check mark columns, and then the techniques are on the left. But long story short, it was an AMI analysis, a survey, and metering to assess how heat pumps are being used. With that, I'll pass it on to Savannah over at Demand Side Analytics to cover the AMI piece of things. Thank you.
Yes, we'll take a look at the AMI analysis. We know that obviously the memo was filed and most of you folks have already had the chance to look at it and review it. And so we figured today we'd go over and we'd hit some of the high points from that memo, also opening up any questions that may surround kind of the technical specifications of the AMI analysis. So we first just want to start off making sure that we're all on the same page with kind of what this AMI analysis was looking at. The sample frame that we're looking at here is participants from BED, Green Mountain Power, Stowe, WEC, and BEC. And this was for customers that had installed heat pumps under the midstream delivery model from 2022 to 2023. And when we looked at all of the makes, models, manufacturers of the program, we were able to, as you can see at the table on the bottom left-hand side, where we start to classify the savings claims by the different heat pump types. The majority of the heat pumps we're looking at in this case are ductless mini split heat pumps. And so based on kind of these heat pump types, we're able to understand where the majority of what type of heat pumps the majority of people installed. We also, on the right-hand side, take a look at how these heat pumps are rated under different parameters. So I think the first thing to point out here is that one of the things we found was that there was an average of 1.4 outdoor units installed at a household. So obviously with the setup of these heat pumps, there may be multiple heads inside the house, but we really focus on those outdoor units that work on the compressors. And there was over one on average in each of these households. The below capacities are the cooling and heating capacities at different rated outdoor temperatures. So for the cooling capacity rated at 95 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as 3 different heating capacities. When we look at some of our normalized metrics, we are normalizing based on the heating capacity at 47 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you see that throughout both the memo and this presentation, but it's obviously important to understand the capacities at all these different thresholds. We also look at some of the efficiency values, so EAR, SEER, and HSPF. You can see that we're using the updated efficiency metrics in this case, just given the timeline of the study and the rollover to those new metrics. Perfect. And so one of the things that we've included in this set of slides is a look at what our pre-modeling filters looked like. And I think at least one of these pieces addresses one of the questions we saw in some of the comments that were posted. And so we do some high-level filtering, which mostly, like I was talking about, includes that sample range, so 2022 to 2023. And we're obviously for this analysis, we're only looking at those residential sites. So we filter out any of the non-residential. And that's the very high level of it. And then we also look at some things like there's AMI available for the customers that installed. And that's a pretty binary whether or not there is. We look at the account turnover just because we really want to look at the same participant over time when we're doing this analysis. So if there's a new person shuts off service and a new person starts service, we don't have that continuity that we'd like to see for this analysis. And similarly, we look to make sure that there's a sufficient number of days in the pre and post installation periods. We use a cutoff of 300 days to kind of make sure that there's enough data to inform as well as predict on the pre and post period for these customers. I think this load modifiers modeling filter is one of the things that I think we saw a comment in at some point. But essentially, since the purpose of this analysis was to evaluate the technology and not necessarily the program, in this case, we filtered out homes that had changes in load modifiers, which does include the installation of heat pump water heaters, electric vehicles, solar, and batteries. And so for this case, we're really just trying to understand what's going on based on the heat pump installation. And then one of the last kind of filters that maybe is it's a little less defined as we see in some of the above ones, but there's this idea that the prior electric heating, we're looking really at customers who are switching from fuel or wood or natural gas to electric. And so in this case, there was some amount of information we had on whether or not a customer had prior electric heating. And in this case, we filtered those folks out as well. And so you can see if you look at the table on the right-hand side of this slide, where each kind of filter, how many customers are dropped out along the way. And you can see that the majority of these are really whether or not customers have AMI availability, as well as enough data for us to perform the analysis on. The other filters just drop out a couple customers here and there. So this is a high-level kind of overview looking into what the actual methodology we're using here looks like. So if we just start with this graph on the left-hand side, you can see kind of these swooshes based on looking at the different average daily temperatures and kilowatt-hour usage for an average customer in this case. The green points on this graph show you what usage looked like before installation, and the blue points show you what usage looked like after installation. And if you look at the top line of this graph, you can see where we kind of define heating, base, and cooling. And so in a lot of the results that we show, we break out the impact into these three bins. And the idea being here that under a certain average daily temperature, the household is likely heating, and above a certain average daily temperature, the household's probably cooling. This base sits in the middle where customers may either be doing neither, which is what we would expect for the base, and sometimes maybe you have certain customers that are cooling or are heating in this period. But you can see kind of how we split these into those three different bin values. And this graph is obviously a neat graph to look at because you can really see kind of what's going on, especially in the heating period. So obviously there's an increase in electric usage during that heating. So you see those slopes differ between the blue and the green points. In this graph, the base looks to be pretty similar, and then the cooling, there's a bit of a different trend, but it's not nearly as much of a difference as we see in heating, likely because there are customers that have electric cooling going into installing a heat pump. A lot of these customers, obviously, like we talked about, are switching from fuel to electric for their heating. And so we specify the regression equation at the bottom of this slide, which is obviously has a lot of kind of information, but I think the big pieces are we do look at the cooling degree days, the heating degree days, as well as those interactions with the pre and post, and then the day of the week. So we know that consumption differs, especially for these customers, based on what day of the week it is, kind of how you're using your heat pump, as well as obviously during the weather, which is why we use those heating and cooling degree days. And for this analysis, we actually use individual customer regressions. So each model is fit independently for a single customer for those 7,000 some customers that we're analyzing, and then we're able to aggregate it into different ways and different cuts. So that's kind of how we estimate those differences in the pre and post period based on the historical data that we're using. Obviously, a big question that exists for heat pumps is kind of how much do they save, and not necessarily how much do they save in the given year that they were installed. And so the results that we look at when we look at the impact of the installation of these heat pumps, what we're actually doing is we're defining the model on the historical usage as well as the historical weather that customers experienced. We understand how heating, cooling, day of the week impact a customer's heat pump usage. And then we actually predict on TMY-X weather, which is the successor of the TMY-3 weather. The difference between these two and why we kind of moved forward with using TMY-X is we know the department's making that move towards using TMY-X. The difference that does exist is there's fewer heating degree days and more cooling degree days in that TMY-X weather. And so we fit that model based on the weather that the customer experiences. If you look at the map on the left-hand side, you can see the zip codes that we're working with within this analysis, and the different color coding gives you the idea of which zip codes were mapped together to a singular weather station. And we focus on those weather stations that do have the availability of TMY-X data. And so we model, like I said, on the historic weather and the usage, and then we predict on these normal conditions for a hypothetical future year. The idea here being that we do understand that weather changes year to year, and we want to understand what a heat pump would do in a typical year, which is why we use this TMY-X data. So as I kind of spoke about leading into this, these are the estimates derived from our daily modeling for those 7,000 customers that we looked at that made it through all of our filtering. And what we see here is that there is a 1,885 kWh increase in the annual electric usage following the heat pump installation. And so a couple things that I've pointed out that you can see in this table is that we've broken down the impact by that heating, cooling, and base bins, as you can kind of see here, as well as the right two columns of this table show you what the normalized impact is, which, as we were speaking about, that is normalized based on the heating output at 47 degrees for that model that the customer installed. And so you can see the normalized version as well as the impact for the household. And I will make the point when we look at the results comparison, this number right here is equivalent to the household impact. And as we kind of looked at earlier, we see that there's multiple outdoor units installed on average within the Vermont territory. So one of the cuts we decided to look at, given that we did this individual customer regression where we can look at the different cuts within the region, is we looked at the heating utilization in natural gas territory versus the rest of the state. So we cross-referenced with VGS to understand where natural gas exists, and we identified 1,300 customers that were in that natural gas territory. And then the rest of the customers are binned into kind of that rest of the state. And what you see here is once we start looking at those customers that have access to natural gas, we can see that the impacts for those customers is approximately half of those that don't have access to natural gas, which is kind of the first inclination as we started seeing the results come in, that maybe there's some explanation here regarding how customers are using their natural gas systems in tandem with the heat pumps that they are installing as well. And this is, again, just the secondary cut to that. So this is us drilling down further into if we split those customers that are within the natural gas territory, we can look at those customers that are VED customers versus non-VED customers, and we can see how these differ as well. This is just kind of to bring about, again, this idea that we can look at these cuts in different ways to understand really the drivers or different populations that utilize their heat pump differently. So this is us. We also did some modeling on the equivalent full load hours here. So you see this table shows a couple different values when we're looking at these equivalent full load hours. We do the calculations based on the rated heating capacity at those three temperatures, so 47, 17, and 5. With that rated heating capacity at 47, we find the equivalent full load heating hours to be 642 hours. If we take into account a bit of weather weighting, so understanding where the typical weather runs across these capacity values in Vermont, we get an EFLH of about 133 hours. I think the point we make here as well in the memo is the appropriate value is important depends on how the construction of the TRM measure is adopted. And so this is the results comparison that I was alluding to a little bit earlier, as we talked about that per home versus per heat pump values. I know that this table is included in the memo as well as included in the notice for this workshop, so I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. We have the 2017 Vermont metering study, the 2021 Vermont AMI study, the 2024 Maine metering study, and then the final two columns are this actual analysis that we ran. And so for this analysis, given that we were looking at studies that had looked both on a per heat pump and a per home basis, we're able to kind of look at both of those independently for this study, given that we knew that going in. And I think obviously the highlights here that I think people have seen is if we were to look at that impact line, we see from the 2027 metering study that there's less impact now that we're seeing for those customers on a per heat pump basis. And that's based on probably a couple different things that we talked about. The use of tandem heating with other sources, or even potentially customers, switching off sources that we found in our study, where they will switch off the heat pump and rely exclusively on their other heating source. We have a handful of other comparisons here as well, including the fuel offset, which is calculated based on an estimated heating kWh value, heat pump efficiency, and the assumed thermal efficiency of a baseline fossil fuel system. And so these kind of create that comparison that starts the conversation on maybe how things have changed or how the analysis has differed over time. And I think we'll just round it out with this trend that we did find when we looked at homes where there was 2 winters of post-installation data. So obviously that was not the full set of customers in our population, just given on when customers were installed, as well as when we got data throughout the time of this initial analysis. But when we look further out for a 1 year versus 2 year after installation, we did find that there is a change in the heating slope, and that customers appear to be using the heat pump maybe a little bit more for heating than they had in that first year. So these are statistically significant in terms of heating slope. Although, as you can tell when you look at them in terms of this graph, it's not an enormous jump by any means, but there is a difference here that exists over time, which can be chalked up to either an increased confidence in their heat pump after going through a winter with it already, or other factors like they no longer have access to their alternative fuel sources for heating. And I think an analysis of additional winters just continue to help to inform whether this trajectory is something that may continue to go up or may have a single year bump after 1 year and then plateau slightly, which I think is something that we'll be looking into.
All right, thanks, Savannah. So that concludes the AMI piece. So let's pause before we talk about metering and see if there's comments or questions from the audience at large. I'm not hearing anyone. We can take questions at the end as well. We'll pause again after metering, and then we'll at the end as well. Okay. All right. So for metering, I don't want to bury the lead. The idea on metering was to uh, really see if it was directionally the same as AMI, and also to give us insight. So when you go into someone's house, you get a lot of insights into what they're doing. And again, not to bury the lead, not only directionally was metering and AMI in agreement, it was also quite close. You would not expect them to be exactly the same because one, they're different techniques, and two, we metered 41 homes with its own uh, statistical, significance and variability versus doing AMI in 7,000. So different techniques, different counts, but you'll see in a minute that things really align pretty well. Average house size, 1,900 square feet, so reasonably large, not massive, but no, these are larger houses. And then a range of heating sources, but most homes had a boiler furnace. You'll note if you're astute that these add up to more than 100% because homes will have more than one heat source. So they may have a boiler and a wood heat, or they may have a through-wall heater in part of the house. Next. Okay, the average outdoor units per home was 1.24 in this smaller metering study, and if you remember, that's a little bit less than AMI. And so then when you see the outdoor unit capacity per heat pump, pretty similar to what's in the overall database, but that the average household a little bit lower, and there's nothing mysterious there. It's a little bit lower because we had a smaller number of outdoor units in each home versus AMI. Nothing really earth-shattering there, just a little bit of variability in the smaller piece. The average COP is what?
Sorry.
Um, so at the minimum capacity of 4. Next.
Dave, we may have missed your last comments, or at least I did.
Sorry, my coverage may have dropped out. Yeah, just go back one, Chris. Sorry. I was pointing out that the COP at minimum capacity at 47 degrees tends to give you the highest number you're going to get from a heat pump, and models have been focusing more on that recently with getting higher numbers. Next. Nothing earth-shattering here. We do have it's really showing that we have a large number of larger heat pumps, larger being approaching 2 tons. The average was about a ton and 2/3, but most heat pumps were 15,000 BTUs an hour on up. Next. So looking at what had been the primary heating sources before heat pumps, boilers and furnaces were the larger ones from the last slide. Boilers tend to be a little bit bigger, and you'll note that these are much bigger than the household heat pump capacity. These are size larger than what the house needs. I hate to use that term oversized, but they're quite a bit bigger than what you would need on a cold day in a house. So these houses are not in fact needing 85,000 or 100,000. And I think any of us that have been in homes know that contractors tend to put in fairly large fossil units. Natural gas is not the dominant source. It tends to be more oil, propane coming in second place. Again, nothing new here really for a rural state like Vermont. Next. Okay, apologize. These are small. We're not actually going to dig into the minutiae here. We really wanted to give just high level. So each one of these boxes has 4 graphs. The orange is the delta T, the difference in temperature and air between the air going into the heat pump, which is going to be about 70 degrees, and coming out, which is going to be in the 110 to 120 degree range. The blue is showing amperage. We're metering every fan on indoor units to see when they're running and what they're running at. Red is power going into the heat pump, and then black is temperature, outdoor temperature varying from 0 on up to 50, 60 degrees. We're just pointing out here, so just looking at it just very roughly, those vertical spikes mean that unit's turning on and off. So these are essentially unused heat pumps. You're seeing there's a flat line around 0 for delta T, delta temperature across the heat pump, power use of the fans, and these little spikes mean they turned on for an hour here, an hour there. Essentially, these are not being used for heating. Next. this is what the graphics look like if you're looking at them for so medium. So again, here we're seeing a little bit of use, but this is still, I said medium, I meant low. There's not a lot of use going on here. So you can pick out these little spikes of use. It looks like one household used it for a chunk of a few weeks towards the spring. Other ones just turned it on once in a while. So not sure exactly what was happening in the house, but really low use, just not much going on here. Next. So why low use? None of this should be a surprise. Some homeowners choose to use heat pumps only for cooling. Not a huge number, but certainly a number. Sometimes a heat pump is serving a space that's not used a lot. It might be a bonus room above a garage, could be a garage even. Um, some folks will note that they're worried about their electric bill, and we can argue about whether the oil bill would have been bigger, but you'll see some people get a high electric bill and get concerned and turn the heat pump off. Um, Comfort comes up sometimes. I wouldn't say that was common. And then natural gas, that's not a cause, that's really a correlation. They have natural gas and maybe they perceive that the natural gas costs less to heat with, so they're using that natural gas system. And then lastly, central ducted systems. There was not many of those, but they had high switchover temperatures, so you can set your thermostat to flip over to fossil instead of the A coil above it, which is the heat pump. And there were some high switchover temps, which we see in other states. This is not unique to Vermont. Next. Again, same theme as before, but this is a moderate use. You can see that now you're seeing this furry looking graph that's got lots and lots of vertical, meaning these are heat pumps being used a pretty good amount of the time, but it's not completely solid, as you'll see in a minute, for a high use. But this is someone who's using their heat pump quite a bit intentionally, and they're using it for heating. Next. So how do you get to moderate use? It could be that it's competing still with their other system. It could be that is a comfort issue and they feel like the heat pump's not keeping up when it's cold. Or it could be that they use it in a way that we call appliance use patterns, which means they come into a room, they turn on their heat pump, they sit down and watch TV, they leave the room, turn it back off again. So that an on-off use versus setting it and forgetting it, which we all prefer people do with their heat pumps. Next. Okay, and this is high use, and you see these bands of just, you can't even see the spikes. It's just a constant band, meaning that it's constantly providing hot air, and then the power use is showing the power is being used. So this is the kind of curve, and the point of today was not to do microanalysis of our metering, but you can see what we're seeing when we're pulling up our data. So these are high use heat pumps, and obviously we analyze the data and pull numbers out of it, but it's really just to give you a very quick show and tell of, you can see right away when someone's using their heat pump intentionally for lots of use, lots of heating. Next. So high use can be really spring from a number of things. It all mostly springs from user intent. They want to use their heat pump. Then the next level is it's zoned in a way that allows them to use their heat pump to provide most of their heat, so they don't have cold spots because there's not a heat pump in a room. Like we'll see houses sometime where heat pumps are only on the first floor, not in the second. That would prevent you from being a high use household. And then some homes just don't have another form of heating. Their furnace broke and they're happy with their heat pump, or they stopped using wood because they were tired of chopping wood, and it's all heat pump all the time. Next. Okay, so here are some of the numbers that we pulled out. So this is a sorted column chart showing individual homes. So there should be something in the order of 39 or 41 of these things. And you can see it varies quite a bit from people using, this is electricity use for the year for the house. And it's quite low to zero for a number of houses and very high for others. The average is shown here by, for AMI is a dotted line, and then the red line is the metering. And they vary a little bit, not a lot. I mean, obviously it's better than directional. These are quite close. Remember, the metering is for 41 homes, so the range around that, if you wanted to say I wanted 90% confidence, is going to spread and likely cross over that AMI. So my view of this is we're seeing the same result from the two, but numerically it's not precisely the same because, again, different technique, different count of sample populations. But same story though. Next. Yep. So here we see on the heat pump basis, last one was by the home basis. Here it's heat pump. Wow, they're closer now. Well, remember before when I said that the AMI analysis showed there were more outdoor units per home. Not a lot more, but like 10% more. Well, that's why. So even though the per home looked a little different, when you do it by heat pump itself, it gets even closer. So I wouldn't hold a lot to, oh, those numbers and the lines are overlapping. It's more, they're more than directionally the same, and they're showing similar results. But I wouldn't say that if we ran it for 51 or 41 more heat pumps, we would have them the lines exactly tight. But again, the story is that we get the same result for metering and AMI. Next. Same thing. This is just normalized by thousands of BTUs per capacity. Nothing new here. Next. And then equivalent full hour, you would expect these all to be the same because it's the same base data. Next. Okay, here what we did was we took the same sorted column chart, and we took a look at what they said in the survey, what they were doing. So do you leave it, set it and forget it, use it all the time? Do you turn it on and off? Um, do you claim to not use it, or did you not tell us what you were up to? And obviously it's a survey response, so it's not going to be as precise as metering something. But we can see here that directionally on the right, the larger users tended to leave their heat pump on, set it and forget it kind of behavior. The ones in the middle were more often users who turned it on and off. So that appliance style of usership. And then blue and red, no response, or said they didn't use it. So nothing surprising here, but it does point out to that those that in the survey say that they set it and forget it tend to be our higher users from the bunch. And I think the reason why there's fewer bars here is because not everyone who we metered answered the survey. Most did, but maybe not every single one. Next. This is kind of interesting and really shows the same result. So what it's saying is when heat pumps are on, what is their average use versus temperature? And you're going to use a heat pump higher compressor use when it gets colder. So no surprise there. When it's warm, the heat pump's using maybe zero point 0.2, zero point 0.3 kW. And when it's really cold, it's getting up into the 1.2 range. Again, this is an average. A larger heat pump or a single heat pump could use a little bit more. But this all makes sense. But then let's take a look at all heat pumps, not just heat pumps when they're on, and that's quite a bit lower. And what that's telling you is that when it's warm, not all the heat pumps are running. Makes perfect sense. If it's warm, you don't need your heat pumps running all the time. So across the population, some will be turned off. When it's really cold out, 0 degrees and below, though, you would expect these two curves to start to match each other. You would expect all the heat pumps to get turned on, and they're not. The curves are staying apart. What that's saying is there's a number of people who are not operating their heat pumps when it's really cold out. And this will be in the report for future, going over, but we wanted to just give you an early indication. Next. This is just showing average daily sort of power peak, and the heat pump use peaks early in the morning when it's cold, falls off during the day when it's warmer, and then rises a bit at night. Nothing too shocking here. Next. Okay, this is COP, coefficient of performance, which is a measure of the efficiency of a heat pump. It's going to be higher when it's warm, and then not as high, lower when it's cold. That's well known about heat pumps. And a COP means how many units of energy. So 4 means you're getting 4 units of heat for every unit of electricity you put into the heat pump. The rating is blue. The rating at max capacity is red, and our COP metered is green. So it says we're plausibly going in between the ratings. It looks like the metered is a little below rated when you get down to 0. We've seen this in other studies too. So nothing surprising here. It's just showing that the COP is pretty good and quite good when it's warmer. Tails off as expected. Next. Okay, this shows where heat came from, and to be really precise, this is heat across a home. A heat pump is directly metered. We meter energy going in, energy going out. For boilers or furnaces, we measure temperature, and then multiply it by a capacity. So it's the fossil fuels more of an estimate, less than a direct meter, but it's still pretty close to what's going on. Next. So this is a stack column chart where what we do is for each temperature bin, we look at all the heat sources across the house, and we expect it to look like this, kind of triangular, where there's very little heat being used when it's 62 degrees, and lots of heat when it's being used when it's negative 10 degrees. And you can see the orange is the fossil fuel output, is the dominant output, and heat pumps are making up a portion of the heat use. Heat provided. Next. And then we took that same curve. The curve before was just equally weighting all the temperatures. Here we multiplied by the hours at that bin. So we all know that even though it gets cold in Vermont, it's not really cold at negative 10 degrees for many hours a year. So that column gets real small. But it is 20 degrees, 25 degrees a lot in the winter. And those columns get higher because we're multiplying the heat use by lots of hours. And it's showing, unfortunately, the same story, which is fossil fuel is providing more of the heat than heat pumps for these 41 homes. I think that's what I've got. I think we're to a title slide, Chris. Yep. So let me pause there for questions, either AMI or metering results. Thomas Lyle has got his hand up.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. Quick question, maybe two questions, but
Sure.
on slide 11, where you compare non-BED homes with natural gas and BED customers, seems like there's quite a bit of a difference between the impacts, especially on the heating side.
Yep.
Is any indication as to why that is?
Let's get that slide. Let's get the slide up, Chris. Slide 11, and then we'll Jesse or Savannah, either one of you, if you want to jump in and mention that.
I mean, I think it's the same thing, right, Thomas? You know, the homes with access to natural gas use their heat pump less than, you know, same is true in BD territory. That's true in the rest of the state, right? That the homes with access to natural gas tend to have lower heat pump utilization for, you know, economic or whatever the reason is. But the same thing that's true in the state as a whole is true within BD territory, that we see higher heat pump utilization in homes that don't have access to natural gas.
It is interesting, Jesse, though, that the difference between the two, that even looking at the 90% CIs, that the non-BED, well, let me see if I got this right, Jesse.
Sorry, I think I answered the wrong question. These are all homes with gas. Sorry.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
BED is half of what BED is, and yeah, yep.
Yeah, 90 to 95, 98% of our residential customers are on natural gas, or a little bit different from the rest of the state. So.
Right.
No, I apologize. I forgot this was a natural gas only. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the size gets, but there does, you know, something, I don't know if it's territory, but yeah, there does, you know, there seems to be the BED group, whether it's, you know, demographics or whatever, seem to be higher utilization than the non-BED homes with gas.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that more commitment to heat pumps, or, I mean, I'm making stuff up here a little bit, but like what would cause that? I wonder what would cause the difference. So for folks in Burlington with a heat pump and gas to be more enthusiastic users than folks not in Burlington, right? We'll turn it back to Thomas.
I'm sorry.
I'm really almost repeating your question, saying they both have natural gas. Folks who are in Burlington are using, let's not get too precise, but around twice as much electricity in their heat pumps than those that are outside of Burlington. I mean, it's conjecture at this point. It is an interesting finding, though.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Catherine came online, so maybe she knows through her customer survey. I know Chris Burns is online too, and maybe they can shed a little bit of light. I just wanted to point that out because directionally, and by the way, for those who don't know me, I'm with Burlington Electric, so this is the reason why I'm asking this question. So yeah, I mean, the way this is directionally heading is, my understanding is the department is considering carving out natural gas customers from the rest of the state. And when I say rest of the state, all those who are basically on propane or oil. Where I see a difference even between natural gas customers, both within BED and outside of BED, and I'm just trying to confirm if that's really the case. It looks like it is, so that's the case according to the slide. But the follow-on question is, what is it that's kind of driving Burlington customers on natural gas to use their systems more for heating? And there's a follow-up.
Unfortunately, I think we didn't get to include BED in the survey, right? Because BED was done, like we got the data later. So the customer survey there was no BED customers in the survey. So we can't layer in the survey responses because BED didn't get the data in time to be in the survey.
Okay, all right.
That's true. One thing that just occurs to me, and I don't have evidence for this, but BED has a lot of rental smaller units. And it occurs to me that the heat pumps might be more effective in heating a smaller space. You may have less of the supplemental issues there. But that's just, I mean, we'd have to look into that further. That's just something that occurs to me. I know when we look at BD projects that the heat pumps come through sometimes with no backup heat, which you're not really necessarily seeing elsewhere in the state.
Hi, Barry Murphy with the department. Additionally, Tom, it may also be BED's electrical rates kind of maybe help calm or given the lower electrical rate that BED typically has versus the natural gas cost, that maybe doesn't have quite as much tension between what fuel source to use to heat a home as it would outside of BED territory where it's a little bit more expensive.
Right. Yeah, that may be. I mean, customers are certainly motivated by their operational costs, their heating costs. So, but it's kind of so there's a follow-on question to that, and kind of goes to the bigger issue, the bigger picture. So in one of your slides, David, I think it was the high use slide where you show those squiggly lines where those who intentionally wanted to heat, I didn't write down the slide number, but if you can go to that. Yeah. So I think you said one of the reasons why these customers are high use is that it goes to more about intentionality. Like they wanted their heat pump, but they wanted to use their heat pump a lot for heating. And so it was more intentionality there. But at the very beginning of the presentation, Savannah, I think the study excluded what were called load modifiers. So those people who bought an EV, did a heat pump the next year, maybe did some weatherization, heat pump water heaters, installed heat pump water heaters. To me, that kind of speaks to those who are very intentional about their carbon footprint, and they're all going to use as much beneficial electrification as they can. Yet this study omitted everybody, if I understand this correctly, who also had an EV or had a heat pump water heater, who probably would have had lots of use for their heat pump, but you didn't include them in the study. So I was just wondering if you can kind of respond to that, or.
Well, I'll go ahead and also add one point of clarification. It was only customers within the year before installation or the year after installation that had any of the addition of those load modifiers. So there was folks that may have an EV, may have a battery, may have solar, but they didn't make that choice within the year pre and post. We really removed those customers with load modifiers that would impact how they were using in our analysis period.
So it's a change in load modifier, right? Because what we didn't want to do is you get a EV around the same time as the heat pump, and now we're attributing the EV charging to the heat pump. So it's not the presence of a load modifier, it's the change in load modifier in the year pre and post. So if you had solar the whole time, you're fine. We left you in.
Yeah. Okay, but if somebody bought a heat pump and within the next 12 months they also bought an EV, you excluded them?
That's right, because we don't have a way with AMI to separate what's EV charging and what's heat pump.
Yeah, I think my general point kind of still holds that these folks are really intentional about their carbon impacts and therefore are intentionally making moves and investments in their homes to displace fossil fuels. And they would be using their heat pump a lot during the heating season. But yet you didn't capture that.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, yeah, there's potentially a slice of people who got excluded who may or may not be different from the 7,000 we did analyze. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesse, am I reading this right? I'm reading my tiny little note slide here. Um, it looks like it was maybe 7% removed. Like I'm going from insufficient pre-post to load modifiers. Am I reading that slide correctly? Slide 6, I think.
Chris, you want
So
to?
Tom, I'm not disagreeing with your point. It's an interesting point, but I want to be precise here. It looks like you only removed 350 load modifiers. Is that right?
Yeah,
So
so about
yeah,
6%. So fairly
so,
small.
right. Yeah,
Good point.
I couldn't argue with the point. I mean, sure, I bet there is a correlation, but it looks like about a 5% loss in homes once you're getting down to your 7,000, right?
Yeah.
So, but
Good point. Yep.
yeah,
Thanks.
not to be defensive, it's like it is what it is. But yeah, I think you're right, Tom. But it looks like fortuitously we didn't exclude that many of them. Um, other questions either from Tom or others?
Thank you.
Allison first. She got in first, I think. Allison.
Oh, yes, hello there. I have some questions about heat pump uptake and installation and maintenance, but I don't know if it's appropriate now or if there's another presentation that's happening.
We didn't do a lot on maintenance. I'm thinking here, right, team? I don't think we asked a whole lot on maintenance, whether things, right? We didn't have are things broken in the survey?
There was
Yeah,
a
so
question
basically,
there. I don't think it's in this presentation though.
Yep.
okay, I'll just throw out a few
Yeah.
things at this point. You guys can tell me if it's applicable or if you came across it at all.
Yep.
I live over in the Northeast Kingdom, and obviously there's a lot of homes that need weatherization. They're just not in a position where they can take in a heat pump effectively at this point. And so that just leads me, and you guys mentioned weatherization, but it leads me to some of the other issues, like people who are on hydronic systems, who are on water systems, and then people who also have really sort of homes with a lot of small rooms. Like I remember talking with Senator Cummings, and she said she tried to get some heat pumps put in, but with the small rooms, like obviously there's just not some homes that are designed for a good uptake on a heat pump. And so I can tell what you guys were obviously looking at, but I just want to make sure, if you don't mind, that that continues to be part of the conversation where we're looking at certain situations where a home absolutely is not positioned or the homeowner doesn't have the funding to try to, put the heat pumps in a home where it doesn't make sense. The other thing that I just wanted to continue to just point out and just bring awareness back to, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but just to reiterate, my son is an electrician. They also have a new heat pump installed in their home, and just the maintenance factor. Again, thinking from the Northeast Kingdom, there's a lot of poverty here, a lot of people throughout the state who don't have money, and it can cost people a lot of money to yearly have to do maintenance and get them, make sure there's not mold, and is there any sort of leakage of refrigerant that's going on. And a lot of people also in the Northeast Kingdom who I've talked to have even had struggle with finding someone to do that maintenance, and they don't know if there's mold. So just that sort of that aspect that I just wanted to make sure to shed light on is the homes in Vermont that cannot take a heat pump effectively at this time. Some can obviously do weatherization and could land in that place, but some it's just not going to happen. And then just the maintenance and the cleaning aspect of it. And I didn't know if that played into any of what you guys were looking at in your analysis. It doesn't seem so at this point, but I do just feel like it's an important part of the conversation. So thank you.
And
Yeah,
it will
certainly.
be, it is something that we are looking at as part of our low income component of the
Thank you.
evaluation.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Next I have Dave Westman with a question.
Good afternoon, Dave Westman with Efficiency Vermont. A couple of weeks ago, the department was presenting a summary of this analysis and suggested that there may be an additional study forthcoming on longer term usage patterns. I noticed that on slide 14, titled "A Promising Trend for Lifetime Utilization." There is that uptake in the second year, or uptick in the second year. Can we get a status on whether or not that user group with 3 to 4 years of history and experience using a heat pump is going to be completed soon, or in what time frame?
I'm going to throw that back to the department, Barry and
Uh,
others.
I can be responsive to that, Dave. We are still in very early portions of discussion as to what that would look like in terms of the study cost, etc. So we're still working on what that would be. Since it would primarily be, in fact, entirely be AMI analysis, I would imagine that once we have things in place and once we can get the data, the actual analysis portion would be fairly quick. But then the interpretation of that analysis would probably take a little bit longer. Exactly what that would mean in terms of dates or when it would be available, I cannot say at this point.
Okay, certainly longer than a month, probably longer than 2 or 3.
Potentially.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
But
David.
definitely by the end of this year, then, you think?
If all other constraints are equal, yes, but there are other issues that we'll have to look in, because this is obviously, for example, it was be kind of not something we had originally budgeted for within our evaluation scopes. So we'll have to see if we can find the money.
Understood. Thanks, Barry.
All right. I think that's all the hands I see up. I will throw the microphone over to Catherine to do the next section, which is talking about the survey. Take it away, Catherine.
Thank you. Catherine Parlin with West Hill Energy. You want to get us started, Chris? So we did a survey. It was mostly solicited through postcards and emails, and we got 729 responses. And so the purpose of the survey was to look into the patterns, like what's happening on the customer level, provide some insights into what we saw in the AMI analysis, to look for reasons for differences in the usage patterns, and talk about the training, find out about how participants responded to the training, what they remember, what they were taught about how to use their heat pump, and ask about the fuels, the cooling usage, and also we use this as a method to solicit participants to engage in the metering study. So actually, before I go to the next slide, in the AMI analysis, all of the participants in the AMI analysis were put into 3 buckets, and that was low, medium, and high heat pump usage. And it's mostly like a third. So it's a third. So it gives you an idea of how much people are using their heat pumps according to the AMI analysis. And we used that in the survey analysis to try to take a look at what kind of patterns are we seeing, and are we seeing high use associated with those particular patterns. So you will see that on the next one, the survey responses were relatively consistent with that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So when you look at it, you can say, well, there's pretty much a third in each of the categories, and you can see where the differences are, and what it is that's driving the higher or low heat pump usage. So we had about 18% of respondents said that they don't use their heat pump during the winter. And we asked them how they were using. So the left-hand side is the heat pump, and they leave on, the people who leave on the heat pump, about half of them said we leave our heat pump on. These are people who had fossil fuel alternative heating sources. So that's why our N is 484, because these are other people that had fossil fuels. So you see people who leave it on, as you would expect. We're seeing a lot of those are in the high use category. Then we asked, some people said they turn it on and off, and those are more in the medium use category. And then our not used ones are pretty much, low and medium. So over on the right is how they were using their fossil fuels. Now remember that our high and low use categories are still for the heat pump use. So they're not related to the fossil fuel use. And so we're saying people who just say, oh, I turn on my fossil fuel system at the beginning of the winter and I leave it on all winter, are much more likely to be low and medium. And then back down to the, I don't really use my fossil fuel system, where we're seeing the high heat pump users is sort of as we would expect. So next slide, please. And 81% said that they purchased the heat pump for supplemental heat. So that is, we're seeing again that that's highly related to the correlated with high heat pump use, or negatively correlated with high heat pump use. So that is another item that we're finding. People look at it as a supplemental heat source. Next slide. So we had the group that said, we don't really use the heat pump consistently, like on average winter days or on cold winter days, we don't really use it, or maybe we don't, or we don't use it at all. And the reasons that they gave for this, the top two are insufficient heat, that their house just isn't warm enough, and that they're concerned about the efficiency loss. And so you can see on our donut, there are multiple choices that are allowed. So you'll see that, it adds up to over 100%. But you're going to see like those two account for over 70%. And then that feeds right into the next one, is that people are concerned about the relative costs of operating the heat pump versus their backup heat. And you can see the heat pump is too costly, or opted to use the backup. So so people are concerned about these, are certainly concerned about these things. Next slide. So we asked about, did you receive any training? And we had a certain percentage that said, no, I didn't receive any training. And then for people who said they were trained, they had gotten training, we asked them, what do they remember about it? So almost everyone who said they had training, received it from the contractor. So the contractor is the main conduit of information about how to use the heat pump. On the right, we have the training topics that were covered. And you can see people remember things about the mode settings, cleaning the air filters, and the thermostat settings. These are things that they remember. And on the left, these are the people who said, yes, I received training. And we're looking at what do they remember about the cold weather instructions. So when you combine the people who said, I never received any training, and the people that said, no, I received training, but I don't remember anything about cold weather instructions, that's 34% of all of our respondents. What they do remember about the cold weather instructions are, we have 24% saying, stop using your heat pump, use your backup. And then we have the two low efficiency, that they got the message that the heat pump loses efficiency. And some of them have a particular temperature cutoff, which might, which ranges a wide variety of ideas about what cold is and when the efficiency drops off. And then some don't remember exactly what the temperature cutoff is, but they remember that it drops in efficiency. And the set that remember being told to just turn on the heat pumps and leave it is 11%. So these are the messages that are coming across to people in their training. Next slide. And natural gas, which we've been talking about here already. We definitely, our natural gas participants, we had about 100 respondents with natural gas, and we actually verified them with VGS, so we know they really are natural gas customers. And 76% of them said that they just leave their fossil fuel system on, their natural gas system on all or most of the time, as opposed to well, it's double the amount that it is for homes with delivered fuels, which is oil, propane, and kerosene. And so you can see that, yeah, you can see that difference with the with natural gas, with the the huge part where they are just essentially using natural gas instead of their heat pumps. I'm sorry, next slide. So participant perception, this is how people look at their costs. Again, we see a really big difference between delivered fuels and natural gas. So delivered fuel people, about 50% said that their combined costs were lower, and 9% said they thought they were higher, as opposed to natural gas, which is 25% said they're lower, and 20% said they were higher. So clearly there's an economic message that's coming through for homeowners with access to natural gas. Next slide. Cutoff temperatures. These are people who said, I turn off my heat pump when it gets below a certain outdoor temperature. So you can see it's only it's maybe a quarter of the total people who responded to the survey. And you can see here what temperature ranges they're looking at. So for delivered fuels, most of them are turning it off at 20 degrees or lower. Whereas in natural gas, you see almost half of them are turning it off at 30 degrees or higher. And you can see on the bottom, the average cutoff temperature is 17.5 for delivered fuels and over 22 for natural gas. Next slide, please. So this question just asked them, what are you going to do when your existing fossil fuel system fails? And what we're seeing is that the vast majority, yes, like 75% of people are saying we would either probably or definitely replace our current fossil fuel system with another fossil fuel system. So it shows that the heat pumps are being looked at as a supplementary heat source rather than the primary heat source. Next slide.
That's the end.
So I think the main takeaway here is that people have some pretty serious concerns. They have found that the heat pump doesn't always heat their house sufficiently when it gets cold. They're concerned about the costs, and that they really see their heat pumps as being supplemental and being used for supplemental heat.
All right.
All right, that's the end of our slides. Thank you for hanging in there for the hour. I'll turn it back over to, well, I guess, who do I turn it over to? The department, or how do we want to handle the rest of the meeting?
You can turn it over to me for now, but I'm just
Hey, Ron.
then I will enhance. Well, unless I should say, I guess, is there anything further that anybody at the Department of Public Service wants to say about this before we move on to a presentation from Efficiency Vermont? I'm not hearing anything, and so I guess I'll just do one last call for any questions folks have about the report that we just talked about that we haven't addressed. Okay, Allison.
Oh, yes, thank you. I just was curious if this reporting, especially what was just gone through, I'm so sorry, I have to check your name, by Catherine, just in showing just the need and the concerns and having a backup system in place, just how this information you guys are using right now is who it's being passed to. Because I'm just thinking from a legislative standpoint, it would be really good for legislators to know and see some of these concerns that people have, especially still thinking about the Global Warming Solutions Act and where some of that's going to go with, what are the realities around heat pumps in our state? What are they capable of? What are they not capable of? So I just didn't know if where else this great information and analysis that you guys have done is going to go.
Gary, I'm assuming you're going to take that.
I mean, obviously, this is a public report, and part of the reason why we're holding this workshop is to make sure that this information is shared more broadly than just with the normal stakeholders that we'd be dealing with, Efficiency Vermont and the distribution utilities. We are obviously aware that heat pumps are very important as far as the Global Warming Solution Act requirements go. So we just want to make sure that people are aware that we're doing this study, that this information is available, and that we are actively pursuing. Okay, sorry, I'm not sure where I was going with that particular statement, but we're actively working on this issue, and obviously the other component that we haven't discussed here is
I
we
just
are
want to
doing it.
thank you all. It just seems like very important information just to really be as realistic as possible about heat pumps in Vermont at this time.
I would add, Allison, that we've also been working with Agency Natural Resources to make sure that these updated numbers are getting incorporated into the upcoming climate action plan and are being incorporated into the greenhouse gas inventory, the economic forecasting that they're doing for I'm blanking on the pathways model that they use at ANR that sort of lays out in various scenarios and economic impacts and a whole variety of other factors that go beyond the scope of even what this study has looked at. But these are certainly a component to that now too, and ANR has been read in and are aware of these results. So slowly but surely we're propagating this information, but it touches a lot of different things. And so as one sort of comes up, we're having to almost reintroduce it each time.
Yes, good. And I'm so sorry, two last just very quick questions. Catherine, you mentioned that you were going to be doing some sort of analysis on the low income sort of impacts. Is that in play right now, or do you know when that's expected to be presented?
We are working on that report, and we're working on that component. And I don't exactly have a date for you, but we should be getting that done. And
no, thank you for covering that. And I'm so sorry, this is my last one, I promise. I heard mention by the man who made the first comment, I'm sorry, I think he was from Burlington Electric Department, about considerations about a possible carve out for those on Vermont gas systems. Can anyone speak to that more specifically? I just hadn't heard that come up in conversation yet, and I didn't know if there was more info available.
Do you want to take that one, Alec, or shall I take it?
Yeah, I think it might be good for you to.
All right. Well, obviously, looking at the dramatically different usage and use cases associated with natural gas customers versus the rest of the state, what we are potentially contemplating is different measures within the technical resource manual for those different customers, so that basically, since most of the low use cases seem to exist within the natural gas territory, that would reduce the overall savings associated with and energy use associated with heat pumps in the rest of the state. So if we were to separate that regulated industry of natural gas from the rest of it, it would help it'd help heat pumps within the rest of the state in terms of how we would evaluate their overall savings. It may mean that there's less savings. Well, it does mean that there's less savings obviously available within natural gas territory. Burlington Electric is a little bit of a kind of different cases because they've got a little bit more usage than the rest. So there's still a lot of moving parts regarding what exactly we're going to be doing. There's a lot of things on the table right now. So, but that is certainly one of the discussion points that we're having, is potentially splitting the technical resource manual characterization into two, one for the rest of the state and one just for natural gas customers.
Okay, thank you again.
And David, it looked like you had something you wanted to say, and then I'd like to move on to Efficiency Vermont.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to make sure that as much as we all agree that homeowner attitudes and opinions are important, someone saying I'm not sure my heat pump's going to heat when it's cold doesn't equate to a heat pump not heating when it's cold. I mean, we've metered many heat pumps operating at -10, -12, -15, and heating houses if they're zoned properly for a space. So again, I didn't want people to be left with that impression that we as a team are concerned that heat pumps won't heat when it's cold. That's not the case.
Yeah, I would just second that comment, and if we did give that impression, that was certainly not what we were trying to say. It's very obvious that heat pumps can heat spaces, that heat pumps are very efficient. Unfortunately, it seems that the consumer behavior of using heat pumps is not optimal to the technology. So if there is something that we really need to address, it's not necessarily heat pumps, it's people and how they use them.
Right, and also as we talked about earlier about there are some applications where the heat pumps, in some of our housing stock, which is really substandard, that there's going to be issues just because of the configuration of the home too, and that it's very possible some of this is due to heat pumps being put in places where there's issues with the distribution in the house.
Yes.
So.
All right. Like I mentioned, Efficiency Vermont had asked that we reserve some time for them to make a presentation as well of some materials. So, who should I hand the keys over to at Efficiency Vermont?
Hi, Rowan. Yeah, I'll do a quick intro, but if you want to hand the slide deck over to Ben Plotzker, he will be leading the show for us. So thank you to the department and for all of the state contractors here who helped develop this analysis. Efficiency Vermont thought it would be important and useful to also present some of the analysis that we've been doing on the potential impacts of this evaluation and some of the savings claims. And so that's going to be led by Ben Plotzker, who is also our lead representative on the technical advisory group, um, as well as leading the Tier 3 technical advisory group. So Ben will start the conversation with a presentation about how these overall results would impact potential savings claims and the impact on EEU service offerings. And then Paul wanted to tag on to Ben's conversation by talking about more like this last topic that Barry was just suggesting, which is that we know heat pumps are not necessarily the problem, it's how people choose to use them. And so we thought that starting that conversation now, knowing that this is a technical workshop, presenting the universe as it exists today and how the programs are structured is very helpful for understanding these results in the context of the world that we live in. And that ultimately the next steps in this will be to talk about how do we make heat pumps a greater tool in our toolbox and improve usage characteristics. And so it really has to start with a grounding in what does the program look like today, and that's what Paul's going to address.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And I know I'd stressed the technical nature, and I'll do so again. But I understand that this is all contextual, and so it does make sense to bring in these things. And just I will reiterate though that while we might touch on some of these policy implementation questions as a matter of context, we're not going to be making any decisions in this case or in this forum. This is informational. But with that said, Ben, I think you should be the presenters. Yep, looks good. So I'll hand it over.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'll introduce myself again. I'm Ben Plotzker. I am the EM&V manager and representing Efficiency Vermont today. Just going to provide a little bit of an overview of kind of digesting all that's been presented today and transform that into how does that actually impact our savings claims, cost effectiveness, how does this impact our technical advisory groups, and how we work with the distribution utilities in offering these programs. So I first just want to thank Ridgeline, Demand Side Analytics, and Westland Energy and Computing for putting this immense amount of analysis and work together. I know it's a lot of work, both on the AMI side, in-house metering, and surveying end. So I want to thank them for doing all the fun EM and V work in the outside world, and then internally for EM and V, how do we employ this in our technical resource manuals or our TRM? So my team is responsible for updating the TRMs, which are for many members of the public here, or other utilities. It's really our source of deemed savings, or how do we provide prescriptive programs in that we get a pre-approved set of savings by measure, and we can run a highly administratively efficient program and offer that to Vermonters and other ratepayers alike. All right, so I'll kind of offer some background on the TRM so everyone is privy to how the TRM is structured and how we actually share savings at Efficiency Vermont with distribution utilities. So there are some fairly technical understandings of how the TRM is developed here. But in the easiest way to explain it is that the heat pumps are offered at a midstream offering. So this is Vermont distribution retailers in the state of Vermont. There are some out-of-state distributors, but they are providing incentives at the point of sale to customers or contractors more alike on buying down the cost of these heat pumps at the distributor level. And that is where Efficiency Vermont is receiving that data from the distributors to know where the installs are taking place, what those costs are, what the capacity of those heat pumps are, as well as the make and model. So this is the information we dissect to then inform where the savings are coming from within the TRM. So for ductless and ducted heat pumps in the Efficiency Vermont Technical Reference Manual, you have both a retrofit measure and a market opportunity measure. Retrofit measure being the baseline of the existing heating system in the home, typically a fossil fuel hydronic system, but we do take a blended approach to assume a variety of fossil fuels to help support the midstream model. And that is really that we don't know the actual fossil fuel system in the home, but we use a best practice approach in the M&V world to blend a variety of fuels and hydronic or forced air systems and assume that in the TRM by leveraging the Vermont market assessment. So that's another department evaluation in that we kind of understand the landscape of Vermont and how single family homes are using heating and cooling in the state. So the retrofit measure is the fossil fuel rendering measure. That goes up to an inefficient heat pump. So it's really the savings captured by an inefficient or really federal standard heat pump. What is the least efficient heat pump that you can sell and manufacture in the US? So this is a theoretical baseline in that we know a customer is buying a NEEP, a Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership qualified heat pump. It's on the NEEP qualified products list. But the way this was designed back in the mid 2010s was to design kind of two ways to capture savings as well as two funding mechanisms. So the retrofit measure, which has fossil fuel savings, is supported by the thermal efficiency and process fuel funding and has since transformed into what the distribution utilities provide in their tier 3 incentive. So that is a fossil fuel savings with an electric penalty. The market opportunity measure is funded by the energy efficiency charge, or the EEC. That is claiming a electric efficiency savings. So that is both heating and cooling. So it's assuming the efficiency gain between the NEEP qualified heat pump and a federal standard heat pump. And so this is capturing what the efficient heat pump could claim an electric efficiency against the baseline heat pump. So no fossil fuel savings on the EEC measure, but this is what Efficiency Vermont predominantly claims its savings in. For the retrofit measure, this is predominantly what the distribution utilities in Vermont claim savings on with a few caveats and if there's opt-out from the program. So it's kind of the methodology for how the TRM is designed. It's unique. It's not like many other measures in our TRM, but I just wanted to explain somewhat of the structure so everyone's privy to how we do things in the energy efficiency utility space. So big hit item here is around the savings adjustment. I think we've all taken a look at the downward adjustment in the full load hours for both heating in a variety of territories, and as well as an increase in cooling full load hours. So to really transform that into what does that mean for our existing program savings versus if we were to take the savings directly from this report, what does that impact? So for the retrofit side of things, savings are down 47%, or essentially being cut in half. And then on the market opportunity end, savings are adjusted downwards by 39%. The difference there being there's additional cooling savings, so it's not apples to apples on how both measures are aligned here, but those are really some of the immediate findings translating the full load hours from this report into our technical reference manual calculations for ducted and ductless heat pumps. Next item is around cost effectiveness. So for our energy efficiency utility programs, we are required to be cost effective across our portfolio. So we need a benefit cost ratio greater than 1 to support our programs. This is a requirement, and also a variety of nuances into what goes into the societal cost test for the Vermont State Screening Tool. So for the review done today for this meeting, we leverage the existing 2025 Vermont State Screening Tool, pulling in the new savings for both ducted and ductless heat pumps across the retrofit market opportunity approaches, and that this also includes both the single zone and multi-zone ductless systems and the ducted central systems. This does screen against the existing costs in the TRM, which I will go into some more detail on the next slide around how the cost review is taking place. But this is really taking a pulse on where are we at with existing savings and updated savings and existing costs within the state screening tool. So starting off with the retrofit measure, this is the tier 3 or TEPF funded measure. We're seeing that most, if not all, bins across the ductless offerings are cost effective. There are a few smaller capacity single zone ductless systems that do not screen above a 1 cost ratio. This is predominantly the half ton to 3/4 ton units, so about 6,000 to 12,000 BTUs per hour capacity bins. So we claim savings by capacity bin across these 3 different measures, but we are seeing that there's only a few bins for the ductless single zone system that are not screening. So predominantly kind of in the 1.5 to closer to 2 benefit cost ratio. And for the ducted measure, we're still seeing a really, really cost-effective opportunity with ducted systems, given that the retrofit or full costs for these systems are relatively low and don't outweigh the significant benefits of these ducted systems that are being tied into homes with ductwork. So that's the TEPF measure. The next is the market opportunity measure, which is measuring the difference between a inefficient and efficient heat pump. So this is looking at the incremental cost between a inefficient heat pump and the efficient heat pump. So this would really be, if you were to go into a big box store, or in this case, a distributor, what is the least cost heat pump option versus the purchase price? So there's a much smaller incremental cost than the retrofit cost that is used for the above scenario. So benefit cost ratios here are also well above 1. As expected, some of the smaller capacity bins, BTU per hour, screen a little bit lower than others, but across the board, they're still cost effective as a measure for the market opportunity offering. So really to say it, programs are still cost effective as is across a majority of the savings bins. The EEC funded measure has a much lower incremental cost, so you're really measuring impact across a much smaller cost. And so that's really to move into my next slide, in that as we're well aware, costs have changed significantly over the past 10 years, if that's a variety of manufacturing costs, labor costs, other increased labor costs that we're seeing here in Vermont. And so we have been requested within the technical advisory group as a request from the department to review cost data. So cost data is always an interesting approach to see what's going on in northern New England versus southern New England, what's going on in the Midwest, and finding a good assumption here is never an easy task. But what we did look at was Vermont distributor data to inform This approach with the need to look at labor data, so you can stack those two to actually understand your retrofit costs and screen against that. So I guess I'll skip over that slide and go back. So pardon my delay in alignment there. But really what we're seeing is that the preliminary cost data from Vermont distributors is just the equipment price is aligning with the current retrofit price in the TRM that does include labor. So this comes of no surprise, but we're seeing costs a lot higher than what we have in the TRM, and therefore we need to continue to dive in here and do some investigating around labor costs associated with ducted and ductless heat pump installs. This is not a easy task in that we offer a midstream program, so we get the cost of the equipment from the distributor, and we don't have the actual end use invoice that includes labor from the customer installation. So based on how the program's designed, we're not getting that full knowledge of data, but we do have a good breadth of knowledge in a variety of other TRMs that we develop and support in other territories. So this is the next step in our analysis and working closely with both the department and the distribution utilities within the tag process to support. And just to provide some background on numbers of heat pumps here, it's about 1,500 heat pump purchases that encompass the single zone, multi-zone ductless, and the ducted review here in costs. I'll pause for a second. Alec, I see your hands up.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thanks. Can you just repeat what you said about the cost, that the market opportunity cost versus the TRM? I don't know that I heard you correctly. I just want to make sure I got that.
Sure. So the market opportunity measure is purely looking at the delta in cost between. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just meant in terms of the what exists in the TRM, that's been there for a while versus these numbers here. Are these the same numbers? Or are these different? I just misheard what you said. I just wondered if you could repeat it.
Sure, great question. This is representing retrofit costs, the whole cost of the measure. For market opportunity, what we're seeing in other regions is that the incremental cost has somewhat been linear, and that the baseline heat pump is tracking similarly in cost to the installed heat pump. So really what we're trying to get at is we're not expecting a significant shift in the incremental cost, because the heat pump, the baseline heat pump and the efficient heat pump are not expected to kind of like move away from one another, versus the retrofit being it's simply the full cost. So if we expected $100 of an incremental cost for a small heat pump, we're expecting that to be similar at the end of our analysis, given some of the indicators we're seeing in the Midwest.
Thank you.
Sure. Barry.
Hey, Ben. Two questions, somewhat related. On the previous slide, you were talking about the smaller binned heat pumps that are using the newer numbers that would necessarily not screen as cost effective. Do you know roughly how many or what kind of like typical percentage of units that would represent? If you don't, that's fine too.
I don't. The only anecdote I can give you is that the 1.5 ton system is the most popular single zone system. So we have a majority of installs being at about 18,000 BTUs per hour. So the half ton through the 12,000, half ton through 12,000 BTU per hour is a small chunk of the actual portfolio of ductless heat pumps.
Okay. And my second question, do you have any idea, when you're looking at your updated costs, roughly how much of a delta change that could be absorbed and still keep the heat pumps cost effective?
I don't have that, Barry. As I had mentioned, what the equipment costs that we're seeing now across the variety of capacities is similar to the existing TRM retrofit costs, and so the TRM includes labor. Once you stack labor onto that, it's going to move things a bit. But for your sensitivity analysis, I don't have that readily
Okay.
available.
No, that's fine. Sort of just that. I was wondering if maybe that would be something you had looked at when you realized that these numbers would be shifting things a bit.
Sure.
Thanks.
Any other questions on cost effectiveness or screening at this point? I will say this type of screening is applicable to the energy efficiency utility. For the tier 3 offerings, there is a alternative compliance payment. So I'll speak to that in a moment if there are no other questions on some of the societal cost test impacts. Right. So as David mentioned before, I lead up the Tier 3 Technical Advisory Group, where I work closely with the distribution utilities and the department in coming together with a TRM for energy transformation projects, which differs a little bit depending on the regulated fuels that can be claimed within the Tier 3 construct. But the screening requirement there is to keep cost below a certain dollar per megawatt hour. So there's I believe it's $70 or something of the sort per megawatt hour to fall underneath the alternative compliance payment. So with the existing TRM savings for tier 3, the DUs can spend up to this amount between the lowest and highest capacities for heat pumps. And with the adjusted savings, these are the lowered alternative compliance payment caps that the DUs can provide incentives to. So what this really says is how much dollar value a DU could spend on an individual measure. As we know, incentives are not this high on a prescriptive level or for like the broader midstream programs. So it's still seems like a great opportunity for the DUs, given that the ACP is still relatively high. But I wanted to mention this is what it's looking like for the DUs, and something that we speak closely to within that technical advisory group process. So I'll wrap it up before handing it over to my colleague Paul Lambert. But really what we are continuing to do at this point is work through some of the cost analysis to update the TRM assumptions and how we screen these measures with an updated cost. We are also awaiting any further updates on reviewing further years of performance of these heat pumps. We know that year 2 is statistically significant compared to year 1, so we're curious to get those updates and make sure that we're understanding that these measures are performing differently over their life as the savings are claimed over the lifetime of a measure. And we're also working closely internally around opportunities around controls and really the life cycle of a heat pump. So here at EVT, we're working on a variety of ways to tackle these opportunities, but just trying to make sure that what we're doing in the TRM space is aligned with reality and we can update things as needed.
I'll just offer one slight clarification there, Ben. Is yes, you claim the lifetime, but you also claim first year savings. So for as far as like EVTs, QPIs, etc., it would be the first year savings that would be claimed, and then you'd be claiming the lifetime for a different piece. Subtle clarification. I just want to make. That's all.
That's a great point, Barry. We take first year savings, multiply it by the lifetime. I think what our stance is that we know if these customers are performing, leveraging these heat pumps in different ways in years to come, we should be rethinking how TRMs are claiming savings. If that's the opposite of an earlier placement, in that it's a step function in savings claimed in future years. So just want to say, I think with what we know now, there's a variety of flavors as to how we tackle this. So I look forward to really where this heads and what we can do to actually increase performance in future years for our customers.
Sure.
Tom.
Thanks, Ben. Can you go back a slide to the tier 3 impacts? So I'm just curious here. You've broken it out by single zone versus multi-zone. Have you sliced it a different way in terms of like tonnage? In other words, under 2 tons, over 2 tons, or some variation of that?
Tom, these are outputs from the tier 3 planning tool. So it's simply, averaging the single zone alternative compliance payment versus the multi-zone alternative compliance payment. So I'm happy to, share with you within that
Okay.
tag group as to how that was put together.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right. So this is just the range from the smallest to the largest. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
All right. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I will I'll hand over now to Paul. He'll be walking through some of the market delivery and can also support questions on the back end as well. So Paul, let me know when to proceed forward.
Thanks, Ben. Nice to see all of you. For those of you whom I've not met, Paul Lambert and I lead our utility partnership work at Efficiency Vermont. And the joint heat pump program is a multifaceted, complex arrangement, and we thought it would be helpful in the context of the technical discussion to dive into that and give you some insight in how that works and the different levers that we have that go well beyond any rebate that's offered. So to the next slide, please. So our joint program really is dealing at all levels of program management, all the different touch points that we have that influence the decision, the technologies that are purchased, and also how these technologies are used. So there's a whole lot of customer outreach and education, but also as important, if not more, is the supply chain management. So a lot of work with manufacturer reps, wholesale distributors, contractors, and we manage a network of supply chain partners to ensure that the product's available, that it's consistent, that it meets the qualifications that we put forth. And with that is having qualified product standards that are shared between our DU partners, our other EU partners, and us. And that consistency is really key. And then, of course, program implementation and changes that are made along the way, as well as, the rebates themselves, which I think is where people often think about where a joint heat pump joint program would happen. There's all these other areas as well. And by bringing that all together, we're able to also track it more accurately in terms of what's being sold throughout the state because it is funneling through a single system. But the key point in this is that there's consistency in messaging, not only to customers, but also to the supply partners as well. There's consistency around what the technologies are and what we're promoting for heat pump technologies. And a key piece, and this came up in some of the discussion earlier, and that's access, consistency and access to these rebates and the technologies around the state, and ensuring that Vermonters in different regions and in different customer segments can access these technologies and to reduce their energy costs. And as I noted a minute ago, again, there's consistency in documented savings. We work really closely with our DU partners and our EU partners to ensure that there's a standard. Here are the products we're promoting. And then as we are able to sell those products, we get reporting back from our supply partners as well as rebates that are processed internally. And that provides consistency with what's documented for savings. Ben, if you could go to the next slide, please. So this really, by having a joint program, this provides a lot of different benefits for the customer. There's one process to access the rebates, and I think that's a real key piece, as opposed to having various levels of rebates, a midstream, a downstream, a rebate from one organization, a rebate from another. That's really helpful for the customer to know that they can go through one channel in order to obtain that rebate. Also, the information that we do to promote it is co-branded with our DU partners and our EU partners, not only on the rebate side, but any sort of outreach or promotion that we do. We're working with them to see if they want to co-brand things. Information on our website is co-branded. And when you couple that promotion of these technologies with, I think, a key piece of Efficiency Vermont's brand recognition, and that is objective expertise, that unbiased guidance, that is really a helpful way to help customers kind of get at what's best for them and meeting them where they're at. And on the supply chain, this consistency and this sort of single rebate process really helps a lot as well. There's less administrative burden for them, and if there is, more supply partners are willing to engage and help be part of this process. You see that in their willingness and ability to stock the technologies and the qualified products that we want to see. We also see it in their ability to install and promote these products around the state, and not having to figure out if this customer is served by one utility or another. It's the same rebate, it's the same qualified products list that's throughout Vermont. And that becomes particularly important when you get into regions of the state where there may be less contractors, or it may be a little bit farther for a distribution center. They're not making their inventory decisions or workforce decisions based on the boundaries of a particular service territory. They're looking at on a region, actually in many cases, much larger than Vermont. So we're able to provide that economies of scale. And when doing that, that really just bolsters the contractors. And we do a lot of work upstream with the customers, as I noted, and educating them, working with them on promoting these products. So this gives them the confidence for them to stock those products and promote those products. Last but not least, a key piece is really minimizing the competition and reducing costs between Tier 3 and EEU programs. And we saw this early on when Tier 3 came into being. It could easily been in competition with our TEPF goals. And we had seen in some cases where inadvertently we were engaging customers with the same technology, and there were different incentive offers being put forth. This allows us to combine our resources and really removes that competition and actually reach more customers if we come together collectively. And of course, by not having these parallel programs in existence alongside each other, that reduces administrative costs. And that is a key piece, not only in terms of behind the scenes costs, but also the customer isn't confused by sort of echoing messages, or worst case, actually different messages coming at them around a particular product or technology.
And Paul, as you change slides, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just want to put out there, we're looking at about 10 minutes left, and I'd love
Yep.
for folks to get to have
You bet.
ask questions. So just keeping that in mind.
Yes, I'll keep the pace going. This slide here, this infographic, really is to show you again that there's an ecosystem here in terms of what a joint program looks like. It is not just about having a joint rebate offer, it's about this work at all different levels throughout the process. And many times we're working upstream with supply partners in advance of creating that demand and educating customers, so that when they do reach out to the marketplace, to a contractor, there is already that acknowledged, there's already that inventory that exists within Vermont. And been in this business long enough to know that Vermont always wasn't the first stop for the latest technology. So our work with our supply partners to ensure that we have qualified products that are promoted and in stock in Vermont is a huge piece to this, so that as demand is created, that demand can be met with the right product, and doing that in parts of the state that are typically underserved or energy burdened. And then on the bottom of this infographic, really just showing how Efficiency Vermont with our utility partners play different roles to really engage these different levels of the market. Next slide, Ben. This is just to give you a bird's eye view of the different heat pump technologies that are out there. So these are each different programs. Some of these are midstream, some of these are downstream. But what's common is they're joint programs. So again, that consistency around messaging, around technology, qualified products is all happening here. And then on the right, I've outlined key areas where Efficiency Vermont provides additional value add that wraps around that rebate offer. So we're training contractors, we maintain that qualified products list, we're working with the supply network and looking at what are the next technologies that are coming. And again, all of this is done in coordination with our utility partners, but we're able to take the lead on that and again, really bring consistency to the marketplace. Next slide, please. So if you look at Efficiency Vermont, we've been doing program implementation for many years now and have done it successfully. What we're able to do is bring that statewide platform and infrastructure that our utility partners can then participate in. And I look at our role as sort of making sure that we fill in the gaps. That, best case, we avoid duplicative efforts around the state. Worst case, we are ensuring that services are available in areas or particular customer segments that may not otherwise be served. So that's a key piece to having the statewide effort. In addition, we provide some services that wrap around what I just described to you. For example, financing. Some of our utility partners work with us in the state on the WRAP financing offer, but not all do. So we have our home energy loan that's available there that provide low interest, in some cases even no interest loans to help folks install these measures and others. When we make adjustments to the program, again, we're doing that with our utility partners. We host a monthly meeting. We're talking with them about what's happening. What are we seeing for sales? What are we forecasting? What sort of trends are we seeing and hearing from our supply partners? And how does that inform our program decisions? And again, doing that in unison and very clearly mapped out as we then reach out to contractors and distributors. Workforce development is another area that we're keenly aware of. And in some parts of the state, it's hard to get a contractor or to get qualified equipment. We're looking to fill those gaps and continuously improve that. A couple key examples that I've called out here is the low income fuel switch program, where we take customers that have been served by weatherization agencies. They've been qualified as low income, and now we're working with our utility partners to install a heat pump in a income eligible household. We've also done a host of multifamily new construction projects where we partnered with our utility partners for all electric buildings. And this has happened well outside of the Chittenden County area in some of our more rural communities. And then, of course, innovation. We're looking at what's coming next and seeing what sort of opportunities there are for technology and continuing to bring new things to the marketplace and then doing that jointly with our utility partners. I think that might be it. Yes. So thank you. Barry.
Hi, Paul. I don't think anyone would disagree that Efficiency Vermont and the DUs have done a good job in marketing these and getting this technology out to the customers and into Vermont. But I think that our technical analysis definitely shows that there's a disconnect to the messaging to the customer on how they can use the equipment. I mean, it's all very well getting them the most efficient equipment in the world. If they're not using it, then the benefits are not accruing to them, to Vermont in general, and to the world in terms of.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a significant gap that really needs to be addressed. Is not just moving forward for new customers and new installs, but for the 60-odd thousand legacy systems that we have installed. It's going back as well as forward to try and make sure that these systems are being operated in a way that benefits people the most and Vermont the most.
And that's why I asked if I could present today, is for that very purpose, because you have those 70,000 units that are out there, as well as what's coming next. And if you look at the heat pump market assessment that we did in concert with our utility partners, speaks to many of these elements that have been talked about today in terms of underutilization of the heat pumps. And we're in the midst of drafting that action plan that addresses those. So total agreement that change needs to be made, and I would say all the more reason that you want to do that in a cohesive statewide effort. And the same would apply looking back at those 70,000 heat pumps that are already out there, education and outreach. And a few things, not to steal the headline, but we're looking at like how can you improve how our supply partners are assessing and specing these systems? How can we better educate the customer? How can we promote whole home? And I would say the whole home is not just ducted systems, Barry, but also the installation of ducted systems as well. So it's not a uh, not just a transaction of putting in one or two heads and then moving on to the next house. Keep in mind this has been a fairly nascent technology, but getting it to that next level where it really does look at a whole home like you would a boiler or a furnace. So there's a variety of steps that we're looking at with supply partners, with customer education, with the technology itself that I think will address these things. So there's agreement there. But if you saw all the different ways that we sort of touch and engage our supply partners, we want to do that in a predictable way because we really work so hard to build that workforce. They appreciate predictability and enough runway to make those changes. They want to do it too, but they're also dealing with workforce issues. So we want to be sensitive to that. Let me build on Paul's response just a bit by saying part of the reason why we wanted to present at this workshop is to recognize that there is a tremendous amount of infrastructure that has been built over the years to develop all of these programs and opportunities. And I think that one of the key findings that we now have with actual data and analysis from the department's AMI study is just how much work needs to be done on the consumer awareness. Clearly, people are using them, but are they maximizing their use of them for the purpose of displacing fossil fuel? Clearly not. That's a gap to fill, as you said, Barry. It's not a reason to scrap the whole endeavor. It's not a reason to walk away from the infrastructure that's been built. Efficiency Vermont and our distribution utility partners have really built the benchmark here for easy access to a really transformative technology. It's being looked at across New England and the country as a model for how to make these systems easy for customers to have use to them. So I think that's how we're thinking about these results. As this is just another gap for us to support filling, and no reason whatsoever to walk away from everything that we've built thus far. And I know Alec has his hand up, so we'll jump over to him.
Yeah, thanks. I would just echo that. I mean, I think it's an important point, but I do think that there is a maybe an apples to oranges issue with heat pumps in general as a technology that has maybe been, if not overlooked, certainly under appreciated. And I think a lot of the problems in the behavior seem like they stem from the fact that this is not apples to apples, right? You're putting in a system that doesn't work the same way, and from the quality and the type of heat, but also in terms of how it's set up within the home itself and how it's meant to offset or interplay with the whole home fossil system. And they really just don't work the same way. And so putting in the modularity and the granularity of heat pumps are a major selling point, and they make them super flexible. They make them available to a wide variety of customers, different income levels, different home types, which is great. And that's a really key piece of heat pumps. But when the match of the BTU output and the required zoning for a heat pump is not the priority, and people are getting them because they want to cool a single floor in their house, and they oversize it and then open all the doors and then forget about the heating component, which seems like a significant portion of the population did based on that survey information. I think that part of that is that the heat pump itself was set up to induce that type of customer behavior. And so I would say the customer behavior piece of it is important, but I also think that we do need to keep in the back of our minds that this is not an apples to apples technology, and the controls on how this technology is deployed before we get to the behavior piece of it are equally, if not more important.
Thanks for that comment, Alec.
Yeah, real quick, just jump in real quick. And thanks for that, Alec. I think if I just can emphasize this one point is that it's going to take time to do that. Yes, there are gaps to fill. There's a lot more outreach and contractor training that needs to be done, but it's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take some time, especially if you're talking about integrated controls and other things that improve the economics of running a heat pump system. All of that's really going to take a bit more time, which leads me to kind of my next question. I'm not sure what the next steps are. I don't know what the commission has in mind.
At this point, I would say the purpose of this particular workshop is to start the discussion. I can't speak for the commission as to what they have in mind in this going forward. I think that it's going to start with digesting the report and the information, but I think that there will be, a final report, and then there will be, I know that this discussion will probably continue in different avenues and in different, forum that come before the commission. But, just speaking, I would say at this point, the commission is not taking a posture of, taking any particular next step. We're just kind of gathering this information and listening to what everybody has to say.
Do we know when the final report will be issued?
We are currently still metering, obviously, for the cooling portion of the report. AMI analysis obviously is complete, but we're obviously still have meters in the field for the cooling. I would imagine let me see, is Dave still here?
Yeah, I'm still on, Barry.
Yeah. Do you know roughly when it is we're planning on pulling the final meters? I imagine sometime September or October time.
Yeah, we would pull the remote data early September to get a preliminary cooling thing done, and then do the final pull and grab any local data we need by, I would say, by October 1st. So we needed to talk to the rest of the team, but we try to turn it around by, I think, end of October.
But don't take that as gospel, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, if you need something else, you obviously you'll tell us. That was just top of mind of pull them into summer and then be pretty
Sorry,
punch through.
two Daves. Don't take that as gospel, Dave Westbrook.
Okay.
I knew that. I knew that was directed at me. Well, Barry, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the main question, right? Is that if they turn that over to you on October 31st, we always know that the department will sit on their review of these materials for as long as it takes for you to be comfortable with it. And sometimes there's second takes and whatnot. So if we're not looking at a final report actually being made public until potentially, end of the year, January, how how are we expected to implement this in 2026 if the final report is not going to be issued until 2026?
Well, I mean, obviously, Dave. Oh, sorry. I mean, obviously, Dave. The key and critical piece of this right now is related to the heating season and heating, and we have those numbers and we understand what that is.
Sure.
The only missing component we really have is cooling and the summary piece, which is why we wanted to start these discussions now rather than waiting until we have the final report to then start talking about potential changes that we may have to be made. I mean, we understand what these are, and as a result, we have these numbers. It would be a bit disingenuous of us to sit on it and wait another year and implement them in 2027 when we were aware at the beginning of 2026 that there were fundamental changes having to be made to the measure characterization within the TRM.
So I take it, Barry, that you want us to implement these changes as of January 1 of 26. So we have to file the Tier 3 plans on November 1. Right around the corner.
yeah, I realize that, and there may be some flexibility that we might be, as we have done in the past, that there might be a refiling of plans in the year that they're being done, just to allow for any changes that may have been made after that November 1st deadline. I believe we have done that at least once in the past when there's been a change.
And we have a DRP going in,
I
obviously.
mean, we have well,
December.
that's the other reason why this is important, is because obviously we're running into the DRP, and you have to do your initial planning and everything else, and we have to do our potential study. So all of these things kind of like increase the urgency that we kind of disseminate this data and kind of make sure everyone's aware of it and everyone's working from the same set of information.
Well, our comments are consistent with where Tom is going, is that, it's fair to think about this in the context of 2027. That's when we're going to be filing our DRP. We don't really see the rush in having these be implemented in 2026. The state sits on known numbers all the time and waits for implementation on a lot of different things. Whether that's procedurally convenient or time dependent. So I don't see the urgency with implementing these numbers when we're still digesting them. And as Tom is saying, we're getting ready for our DRP. They're getting ready for their tier 3. This is just a matter of the record.
Yeah.
I understand the department's position. Nonetheless,
I think
we file
Dave,
comments to that
yeah,
extent.
no, I think Dave, if the relative change was less, then I'd probably feel more comfortable with doing that. But since it's a significant delta between the current numbers and these numbers, it makes me feel less comfortable to allow these to run for an additional year.
I know we're running out of time, but Ben, a quick question for you. That range of ACP, was that gross or net? You know what I mean?
Net.
It was? No, I don't mean
Sorry.
net with free riders, but net meaning added KWH.
Added load. That was assuming the distribution utility is 100% renewable energy over the measure of the life. So for some DUs, that would be the value would be lower because they have to include the electric penalty.
Lower than
But does that include the sales too?
Yeah, that's where I'm getting at.
No, and that's a good point. Tom, you brought that up in our tier 3 meeting and how that's modeled. So the planning pool does not.
Yeah, the rules allow for both gross and what I call net, which includes the revenues, net present value of the revenues from each of those. So it's going to
reduce the savings, and it would reduce the future sales as well, obviously, because the KWH sales would be lower over the lifetime of the heat pump.
They would be a little bit lower if these hold up. Okay.
I think with the increases to the ACP though, it seems like it's a huge window.
Huge window meaning?
Like it's a significant increase in the ACP cap next year. So I mean, I don't know. I think these numbers, even if you were to net out sales, I think there's still a lot of room underneath.
Capacity. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at 3:10. I really appreciate everybody who presented and participated in this workshop. I think we had a good discussion. I think I kind of went over what the next steps in this particular proceeding are likely to look like, which is, I think at this point, we'll be awaiting the filing of the department's final report. But like I said, this workshop has been recorded, and off the top of my head, I can't recall the mechanics by which we can provide you the link, but we will be able to do so. So feel free to reach out to the commission clerk with a request if you would like to have a copy of the recording. And I don't know exactly what the timeframes for that will be, but I think it would be relatively quick. So with that, unless anybody has something pressing that they absolutely must say, I will conclude this workshop.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
That's all.